Welcome back, everyone. We're diving deep today into the world of financial crime, and specifically, some really interesting developments in anti-money laundering efforts.
Yeah, it's a complex landscape, that's for sure.
You've probably been following along with us, diving deep into all things financial crime, and today we've got some fascinating cases out of the Netherlands.
Hmm.
We're talking about two of their biggest banks, ING and ABN AMRO, both hit with massive fines for, you guessed it, AML failings.
Yeah, these cases have really shaken things up.
But here's where it gets really interesting. Charges against top executives in both cases dropped.
It's a head scratcher, right?
So that's what we're going to dig into today.
Yeah.
How can banks get penalized for hundreds of millions of euros, yet the individuals at the helm seem to escape responsibility? What's the story there?
Yeah, it's a real puzzle. And it all comes down to this question of accountability, right?
Okay, so let's break it down, starting with ING. We're talking a 775 million euro fine, a record at the time, for what were deemed systemic AML violations. This wasn't just a small slip-up, right? We're talking about issues spanning from 2010 to 2016.
Exactly. Systemic violations, that implies a widespread problem.
So it suggests something was seriously broken in their systems, their culture, something. But former CEO Ralph Hamers wasn't charged. Help me understand this. How does that work?
Well, think about the sheer scale of these institutions. Banks have these incredibly complex AML frameworks in place, layers upon layers of checks and balances. But when you're talking about systemic failures, it suggests the problem wasn't just one person, but a breakdown at multiple points. Maybe even a culture where compliance was, well, let's just say, not prioritized.
So essentially proving that a CEO, someone at that level, was directly involved in specific transactions or knowingly allowed them to happen, that's the challenge.
Exactly. Imagine you're an investigator trying to build a case.
Okay, yeah.
You see these red flags, these suspicious transactions, but can you definitively link them back to the CEO? It's like trying to find a needle in a haystack.
Right. And these financial institutions have top-notch legal teams creating another layer of, shall we say, obfuscation.
Yeah.
So in essence, you're saying ING potentially allowed, whether knowingly or not, criminals to launder vast sums of money, and yet the CEO gets to walk away scot-free. Help me square that circle. On the one hand, we have this massive institutional failing. On the other, the idea of pinning responsibility on an individual is like navigating a legal labyrinth.
You've hit the nail on the head. And that brings us to our second case study, ABN AMRO. Because, maybe ING was a one-off, right?
Right.
But this is where it gets even more intriguing. Because ABN AMRO, they were hit with a hefty fine as well, 480 million euros for similar violations.
And this time, the violations occurred between 2014 and 2020, so even more recent.
And guess what? Charges against 4 unnamed executives dropped.
It's like a recurring theme. Massive fines for the institutions, but the individuals in charge, they seem to escape unscathed.
That's right.
It does make you wonder if there's not some deliberate ambiguity built into these corporate structures, almost designed to shield individuals from being held accountable. But I don't want to get too conspiratorial here. I did notice something interesting in the ABN AMRO case, though. The prosecution's argument seemed a little different. They said that the executives did take some actions to address the issues, but that those actions weren't enough, at least not in the short term. What's the implication there?
Well, for me, that raises all sorts of questions about how we define adequate prevention. If the steps they took weren't enough to quickly stop the violations, does that automatically mean those measures were inherently flawed? Or could it be, and this is where it gets interesting, could it point to a deeper issue with the current AML framework itself? What if the system, as it stands, is more reactive than proactive?
It makes you think. So we have these two major Dutch banks,
Yeah.
both heavily penalized, but with no individuals held accountable. Is this unique to the Netherlands? Or are we seeing a global trend in how financial crime, and specifically AML failings, are being prosecuted?
It's a trend worth watching, that's for sure. And the Netherlands is definitely not alone in this. We see similar challenges in the US and other European countries across the globe. Holding individuals accountable within these massive, complex financial institutions, it's a worldwide puzzle. And that's the million-dollar question, isn't it? What's the solution? If these hefty fines aren't acting as a deterrent, what will?
Yeah, what will it take? Stricter regulations? Different enforcement methods? Should we be thinking even more radically, like a complete overhaul of corporate culture within these institutions? Is that what's needed?
Well, that's the real question, right? And it's something for everyone to ponder. As you continue your own deep dive into this topic, Is it about giving investigators new tools, changing the legal standards of proof, demanding more transparency, or maybe it's a combination of all of these things? There's no easy answer, and that's what makes it so fascinating.
No easy answers, but a lot of crucial questions. These cases, they really highlight the complexities of the fight against financial crime, and especially the difficulties of proving individual culpability within these massive institutions. It's a tangled web, that's for sure. So keep digging, keep questioning, and remember, the answers might not be easy to find, but the pursuit is what matters.
Absolutely.
That's all the time we have for today's deep dive. Until next time.
See.